The ties between the works of John Luther Adams and the world which surrounds him cannot be denied or unfurled from one another. His works such as Become Ocean, Dark Wind, "10,000 Birds", and a nuke suit and outdoor work for up to 99 percussionists. Hailed the natural world as inspiration, as revelry, and as a call for both celebration and caution. They serve as not only a representation of the natural world, but also as a reflection of ourselves and our interactions with that world. Born in 1953 in Meridian, Mississippi, Adams found himself moving around the country often, living many places with equally homogeneous suburban surroundings.
He states that he had a deep and articulate hunger to find a place to which I might belong, and spent much of his high school career either leaving a school or being kicked out of it. He filled his time with performing with various rock bands as a drummer, and eventually went to study at the California Institute of the Arts as an undergraduate in the early 1970s. It was here that he first met James Tenney and Leonard Stein, of which he states he had the supreme good fortune of studying under. After graduation, he began to work in environmental protection, which first brought him to Alaska in 1975. His pieces present themselves more as audio landscapes than the traditional, structured, form-based classical composition. They wander. They paint what Adams refers to as sonic geography, mirroring his travels throughout America in his youth. Eventually, Adams settled in Alaska in 1978, which steeped his compositional style in a kind of stark loneliness. His music shows elements of the sweeping, swelling, sparse landscape that he walked through each morning and evening for over 35 years. One can almost feel as though they are there, hearing the arrhythmic bird calls in the high notes of a piccolo, feeling the chilling wind in a metallic sweep of percussion instruments. His performances, of often epic proportions, proved to evolve as organically as the environment which inspired them. For example, listeners are often invited to wander throughout his larger ensemble performances, creating their own understanding of the piece, viewing it from many different angles and soundscapes. He has said that, "My hope is that the music creates a strange, beautiful, overwhelming, sometimes even frightening landscape, and invites you to get lost in it." I'm one of the last romantics, but my romanticism is informed by quantum physics and the science of ecology.
His claim to romanticism might seem strange from a composer whose music sits within and between the worlds of Cajun experimentalism, environmental activism, American minimalism, and teeming orchestral soundscapes.
Romantic composers of the 19th and early 20th centuries, like Wagner, Debussy, and Vaughan Williams, also wrote tributes to the sea, using nature as a metaphor for human dramas and narratives. But in the hands of Adams and his Pulitzer Prize-winning Become Ocean, his music becomes more than a metaphor for natural forces. It becomes its own elemental experience. Become Ocean is an epic 42-minute work that embodies the Pacific Ocean that crashed and swelled at the beach in front of Adam's Alaskan home. Its musical power accurately resembles the force of nature, so when you listen to it, you feel overwhelmed and awed by the sheer flux and strength of the musical elements into which you are plunged. Here's a quote from Adams describing the making of Become Ocean. If you stop and think about the oceanic dimensions of music, there's this implication of immersion. We come from the ocean, and we're going back to the ocean, right? We're made up mostly of water, and life on Earth first emerged from the seas. And with the melting of the polar ice caps and the rising sea levels, we may become ocean sooner than we imagine. Eventually, we begin to realize that we're part of something much larger than ourselves. Become Ocean embraces this idea, but gets its title from something much more personal for me. Back in the late 70s, John Cage wrote a mosaic poem called Many Happy Returns, in honor of his dear friend, also my mentor and friend, Lou Harrison. He compares Lou's music to a river and delta, with all these different influences and currents, coming together in a big, beautiful sweep of music. And in the last line of the poem, Cage writes, "Listen to it, we become ocean." I've always been struck by what a beautiful image that is. So now, a little history. Some time ago, I was commissioned to compose a piece for the Seattle Chamber Players. Then a few years later, the Seattle Symphony and their music director, Ludovic Marleau, approached me and asked if I would be interested in composing something for the symphony. Part of Ludo's vision for the orchestra is to bring it into the 21st century and to put a special emphasis on new music, so of course I was thrilled at the possibilities. One idea that I suggested was to build on the sound world of an earlier piece I'd composed called Dark Waves, which is a 12-minute piece for large orchestra and electronic sounds. To my surprise and delight, Ludo was very interested. I was calling it Dark Waves on steroids, and I knew earlier on that I wanted to take the oceanic sound and expand it into a much larger time frame. So the result was Become Ocean. Become Ocean's instrumentation and structure plays just as an important of a role as the meaning of the composition itself. One of the most important elements to point out is that the piece is a palindrome, written for 3 sections of one orchestra: strings, brass, and winds. These groups play completely independently from each other. Each group is given slowly moving sequences of sound, often in the form of arpeggios in the strings, and each block has its own rise and fall. Thus the groups overlap in an ever-changing pattern. Harmonies are fundamentally tonal. Simple diatonic intervals form the basis of the wind instrument's staggered chords. The phrase lengths are constructed so that there are 3 moments when all the groups reach a climax together. The first one is early on at measure 106. The second, which represents the greatest surge of sound, is in exactly the middle of the piece at measure 316. At this point, the piece is now played in reverse, and leads into the third climax point at exactly the same spot as the first. This final crescendo occurs at measure 526, with the remaining 106 measures used to get us exactly where we started, the ocean. While all of this is happening, the percussion provides a rippling effect with the use of a centrally placed piano, 4 harps, a celeste, 1 percussionist on bass drum, timpani, tam-tam, and cymbals, and 2 more percussionists placed on each side, playing mallet parts. The percussion section, specifically the pianist and the multi-percussionist, are required to have a lot of stamina to make it through the piece. The pianist is given a continuously pulsing 7-note pattern, and the multi-percussionist is required to roll, without pause, for 42 minutes on the array of instruments surrounding them. Out of all of his works, it is clear as to why Become Ocean won the Pulitzer Prize. Its long-standing message to humanity shows nature's ability to not only inspire us with its awesome might, but also serves as a stark reminder of our own finite existence. As quoted best from John Luther Adams himself, life on this earth first emerged from the sea. Today, as the polar ice melts and sea level rises, we humans face the prospect that we may once again, quite literally, become ocean.